All right, Ian.
Pat.
We just did a segment on the show about Pawn Stars and WADA and the greatest Super Mario Brothers. There was a comment on our video from Reserved Investments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I looked up the guy, and he's a guy who he gives he gives advice on YouTube about what you should watch out for, what you should invest in collectibles and in other hobby fields. And he himself, I believe, he collects video game stuff, and I think also some. I think on his desk he had a Lego set, and then
He's got Magic the Gathering cards.
Yeah, so he dabbles in different stuff, and he's probably around our age, so he likes that stuff. So he did a response video even for us about the WADA and their involvement in that Pawn Star segment. But then he did a different video about it's titled "Do Not Invest in Modern Era Factory Sealed Video Games: Why It Is a Horrible Investment." And we watched this video. And what did you think about this?
So what he goes through, I mean, he says what, and I think, and I'm not an investor, I'm not a speculator, I have no knowledge in this, but I
invest at your own risk. That's our disclaimer.
But I feel like what he said is a lot of very common sense things. I feel like when people get into collecting, I feel like there's a lot of shedding of common sense in pursuit of building up the market around something. So he tells a story about how he was buying a copy of Luigi's Mansion. He likes Luigi's Mansion. And when he was getting his copy, someone else wanted one too, and they asked the person who had opened the case to grab one for them. They handed it to him, and the person looks at it, obviously checking the seal, and then says, "Okay, now I'd like another copy, please." And they get another copy, and the guy mentions, you don't understand, I'm a collector. One's to open, one's to hold on to. So
and the employee was like, "What?"
So he goes into why that's a particularly silly move. One of the main reasons for it being silly when you're collecting modern games is the fact that lots of people have this magic idea now that they're going to collect these, they're going to buy these sealed games, and they're going to be worth something later on. Graded, ungraded, whatever. There's this notion that people are going to start doing this. I used to see it back in the day with the Atlas games that were released by Atlas. They were on the DS and PS2. They were generally released in smaller numbers. They were RPGs, and people noticed that old Atlas games were becoming worth something, so people would start buying a sealed copy and setting it aside to, flip it for later. The thing is businesses are smart. Businesses want to make their money. They want to make that money. They don't want you to make that money later. So businesses like Atlas, they look at what they're selling and they go, we can sell more of this. So they increase the production numbers of what they're selling.
Yeah, because they don't make money off of the
right.
secondhand market.
They have no interest in keeping it collectible for you. They released small numbers because they were releasing games that were, for niche genres. They
knew they couldn't sell a ton of them. Yeah.
But as the popularity goes, they would make more. So as people started buying these games, it also coincided with Atlas making more copies. So now you have games like Persona 4 and Persona 3 FES that people were speculating would be worth something in the future that you can still buy for between $20 and $30 today. So he talks about how, basically that because everyone is doing this, there are, even if there was only 5% of every of the total amount of copies of Luigi's Mansion sold were kept sealed, you'd be looking at least 500,000 sealed copies. And even if that, I would say the number is probably maybe smaller, but I said, even if you go smaller, even if you say 2%, 200,000 sealed copies of something, what's it really worth?
It's a new entertainment product. It's worth what the retail value is, and that's what he was trying to impart to people.
Right.
You have to be careful about this stuff, and this goes back.
And you have to be careful about seeing like a graded sealed copy go for say 80 or 100, because that's part of the speculation market. He could grade something and sell it immediately, and maybe get a little bit more for it, but it's not going to be enough to really tell you that this thing is going to be worth anything in the future.
But it's either way. He says something that I've said before, in a smarter way. I always said, if you really want to invest, put it in a 401k or an IRA or buy stocks, because you're more likely to see an actual return on your money than buying new products. Because he said buy an index stock, which is safe. Get a small return over time, it's safe. Things like that. Because the price to grade games is not cheap. So you spend $60 on Luigi's Mansion 3. You go on WADA, I'm looking right now. For the standard no rush, which now takes up to 6 months, there's a backlog. It's $35 for sealed games. I guarantee you that does not include the return shipping or your shipping to there. Let's just say then shipping both ways is for a game, it's well packed, $15. We'll just say it costs you $50 total to get a game graded.
Sure.
Fair? I spent $60 plus tax. 65, 70, $120 invested into a game. That I'm hoping to make that back in 10, 20 years. How much do you really think you're going to make back on that game? If you can sell it.
Right.
Are you going to get a return or are you going to break even? That's what he's trying to say. It's a fool's errand. It absolutely is. Unless something is released to such a small quantity and you know the quantity. Like Nintendo putting out the Zelda special ones that were only in Nintendo New York, for there was 500 made. You know they made 500 of them. You know that they're not going to be a ton out there. Yes, then maybe you could speculate on that. You can't speculate on new products like this. You just can't.
Well, and he also brings up something that's I think that's important to discuss that Vani talks about a lot. My wife talks about a lot when it comes to comic grading because she works in comics. So people who are out there buying this stuff now, sending it off for grading. Let's say you do VGA, you get an 85. Let's say you do WADA and you get like a 9 to a 9.4. Those seem to be the new condition
out of the box
on average, like out of a shipping box. Out of a shipping box. That's generally what you're going to get. When you look at comics, especially when you look at now, obviously there's exceptions to what I'm about to say for things that are truly limited or truly hard to find. But compare, the grading of sealed modern games with, say, the grading and collecting of slabbed comics in the 90s and 2000s. Everyone started to do this. Everyone sends it in. People are sending them directly out of shipping containers or out of boxes. The majority of these are going to be 85 VGA graded. They're going to be 9.0s, 9.2s, 9.4s from WADA. That's not. So what happens is what you start looking for are 9.6s, 9.8s and above.
Ones that are gem mint where you can't see anything wrong at all, basically.
Vani has always said it, and it's true, and this is what this gentleman talked about too. 9.4, yeah, sure, that's a great condition in terms, just objectively, it's a great condition item, but that is trash to collectors. To hardcore collectors, if you buy a Luigi's Mansion now, you get it graded, you get a 9.4. In 10, 15 years, if there is a market for that sealed game, the price difference between a 9.4 and a 9.6 is going to be huge. Because in a lot of these grading circles, the 9.6 is where it starts to become something desirable. 9.6 and above.
Mint.
Right.
Mint to mint.
9.4 and below. Sure, it's a 9.4, and that's very close to perfect. But to a collector, especially when you're looking at a sea of these games, potentially, or a sea of these graded, Spider-Man number 1, McFarlane's. Yeah. No one wants a 9.4 because there's shitloads of 9.4s out there. A collector is going to look for that 9.6, that 9.8, that 10. And that's going to be even harder to come by. But what is that actually going to be worth? Is it worth you buying a bunch of these and trying to get that elusive 9.8? No, it's not, because you don't even know what it's going to be worth in the future.
And plus the cost to grade them.
Right. The amount of money you're going to put in for a potential return on a 10.0 graded, say, Luigi's Mansion 3
I couldn't tell you.
Is insane.
I guess there'll be collectors in the future that'll be looking at the seals and be like, oh, this seal's a 9.4. Like with comics, you can see imperfections a lot easier, I think, than on a seal on a game, I guess.
I'm not going to say about something I don't know about. I imagine looking at seals just through work. I mean, you can see ones that are dinged or damaged.
But again, that's just we're talking about the condition of cellophane at that point.
Sure,
and that's what it is. If you think there's going to be people chasing that 20 years now, okay. The point is that, to me, that we saw baseball cards, and we saw with comics, we saw mass-produced entertainment mediums that people think that they're the smart ones, that they're going to cash in on it by saving it and putting it away and spending on it when they don't realize that there's a million other people doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And the only things that are valuable are the things that are hard to come by that people want, not the things that are mass produced that you know they're still kicking around in warehouses somewhere probably.
Right.
Or they can turn the printer back on anytime and make them. They can still make PS2 games if they freaking want to.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
a 1.0 Action Comics is still worth something because there's none of them around.
yeah, I can't walk down the street and find one. They're not laying around somewhere in someone's back corner of their store. You know, like what these video games will always be.
So, yeah, he made
We're past new things being collectible 30 years from now. We are way past that point. Once you hit the late 80s, I think we're past that point.
And there was some stuff in the 90s that became it too, but I think with every year that goes on, everyone starts to see dollar signs on things.
We're past it. People thought they'd make money off the fucking Star Trek Next Generation figures or the McFarlane Spawn figures. They're all worthless. They're worthless. Because everyone bought them thinking, I'm going to be rich 30 years from now buying a toy. Or a Beanie Baby. No. 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 It's not happening. I did the same thing too. I bought some comics in the 90s. I'm going to buy a second Daredevil Fall from Grace. They only made 20,000 of them. Yes, but everyone that bought every 20,000 still has them, and no one cares about them. You know, like whatever they said, they claim they only made like 10,000 of them. They advertised that to get people to buy them.
Right.
Stupid little 13-year-old Pat didn't know any better. He spent his allowance money on it. Did I have an allowance when I was 13? I don't fucking know. Well, I couldn't have worked. Anyway. All right. Check out the videos. We cover most of it. But I loved how he said, like, straight up, invest in, like, if you want to invest in an index fund. You'll get probably a small return. You're not going to get a return on this shit. You just won't. And it doesn't account for inflation either, which people don't talk about. When you buy something to, whatever, the whole thing's weird. But I can picture, do you ever see people come in the store to buy an extra copy of something? Well, you don't sell a lot of the newer games anymore.
We don't sell a lot of new stuff anymore. But, I mean, when we did, like I said, there were people, like, we'd get in... like PS2 RPGs, and people would buy 2 of them, and like, you know, some of those we get those in sealed every once in a while, and I'm like, I wonder if this is worth something. And it's like, no, you know, there were ones that had a moment, but then another thing that he doesn't really talk about, well, no, he does talk about it. He talks about it when you go into older stuff. We still don't have a great idea of what numbers are out there for certain things. And he's talking about people, he's like, if you're well off, or if you're okay monetarily, finding a game that's worth $1,000 isn't the big deal that it is if you're in your 20s and you have less money. So he's like, there's potentially copies out there that people are holding on to that they're not talking about because they don't care. They don't need to talk about it.
We always said that about retro games.
Well, and you look at Tim Atwood was a good example of that. No one, there was rumors of it and murmurings, but that didn't become known to the public until recently. And that guy's been sitting on his collection forever.
It's not the only one.
And then even with new stuff, it's even sillier because, there was... I'll use the example of a game like Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne for PS2. That game came out. It was...
Can't spell that.
It was desirable for a while. Sealed copies, even loose copies for a while, went for quite a bit of money. And they found a bunch of sealed copies. And they got put back out onto the market. And whether it was another print run or they found a bunch more sealed copies, they changed all that. And the price of that game went from being like a $100 game to a game that now sells for about $20.
$20 new.
Yeah.
You can buy.
Yep. So you don't know what's sitting out there in a warehouse. Like you said, you don't know when they can turn the printers back on. There's a difference between a first run.
Did they just do that for a Yakuza game a couple years ago?
Yeah, I have one. They
reprinted one that was 7 years old.
They reprinted Yakuza 1, 2... I think they reprinted all of them, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Because I bought the first and second ones just because I was like, oh, here's my opportunity to own these games cheap. Yeah. But those were reprints. But sometimes, like I said, I think with the case of Nocturne, it was they just found more.
They just found them.
There's just a bunch more that they sent out.
Hey, Billy, we got a few boxes of this. Here. Anyway, and one other thing I'm going to say about this, check out his videos. Check out the other one. He did a video directly responding to the Pawn Stars segment. He straight out says, he's not mincing words, that since he's more into the antiques and collectibles communities, he says that there are people in those fields that are looking at what's going on
Yeah.
with these graded games, and they're giving it a very cautious look because of the practices that they see going on with the, you want to say, the inner, everyone knowing each other and basically connected with each other, and so they're
Like I said last week, it's a very, very small world,
and people, they know that people are involved with each other, and so that means that the value of things obviously can be inflated, and to be very cautious of it. And so that's why he says straight out, reserved investments guy, what's his name? We'll call him RI. He says definitely don't invest in new games, sealed games, and he says I'm cautious about the old stuff even at this point because of these we'll just say non-standard practices.
I feel like over time things will slowly standardize, but I would not be quick to rush into it.
Sure.
I mean,
you see where things settle out.
Yeah, everything is going to be collectible to some. Everything will have worth to someone. I don't think video game collecting is going to be a non-thing. I don't think in 20 years there's just not going to be any people interested in it. But I do think right now there is a bunch of hubbub about it because it benefits the people who want there to be a bunch of hubbub about it.
They're trying to inorganically grow it.
Right, exactly.
And that keeps people that are experts in other fields that might want to get into it, they'll stay away because they know that that the numbers don't line up to how many investors are in it, how many people are interested in it.
I think a lot of very serious investors are probably looking at it and they're like, we'll come back to this in 5 years.
Yeah, we'll see once this bullshit plays out, and we'll see who's really buying this stuff and who really, you know what I mean? And plus, they don't know all the stuff that's even out there yet.
Sure.
You can't go and buy a bunch of sticker sealed black box games for a ton of money when you realize that tons of collectors are sitting on them. They can come on the market at any time.
Right.
And that's basically what's happening. When those black box sticker seal games are all on eBay now. It's like $500 for a duck hunt that's, you know, beat up, that has a sticker seal on it. It's like, well, there's a lot of them out there, so it doesn't make any sense. All right. So yeah, check out reserved investments.